Chuck, beautiful day outside today. Would you agree?
Yeah, the sun just came out over the patio there. Yeah.
That's amazing. I have a topic that has come up in so many of our conversations, but it's almost a difficult one to put into an enlightened military universe. Because when we talk about an enlightened military, we're thinking about militaries.
Sure.
But there's a concept that's come out so many times in the conversations we've had about our experiences that I think is really timely today.
Okay.
And so we know that artificial intelligence is putting all of this information together and now coming out with how do we put things together?
Right.
But there's something bigger than that. And they're starting to refer to it in technical circles as living intelligence.
Okay.
Living intelligence, or another way to say that is human intelligence.
Oh.
And human intelligence or living intelligence is not the same as artificial.
No.
Artificial can do whatever, it is the sum and total of whatever we've told it to do.
Yes.
Living and human is an entirely different species.
Absolutely.
And there's lots of great data that says, hey, turn over all of your defense to tech.
God, what a thought.
But it could make less error, but it's far less living or human. And so what I want to talk to you today is about the humanity of the enlightened military.
Wow. Okay. Great. Boy, that opens so many doors. So let me start by saying that I think we misunderstand artificial intelligence because, the sensors on my car are artificial intelligence, right? If I'm not paying attention and I get too close to the vehicle, or when I'm parking and backing up, the brakes come on. That's artificial intelligence, right? As opposed to in asking it to write a story for you or create music, which is something a little different. But I'm not one of those people that is afraid of where we're going. And it's not that I'm afraid of where we're taking our computer science, because I think that they'll take over the world and snuff out the human race. It's because I don't believe that it is possible. I don't believe that there are very few things in the world that are impossible. I don't believe we can go faster than the speed of light. I don't believe that we can alter gravity. I don't believe that we can create a silicone-based system that can ever recreate humanity, because there's something in us. Now, if you're a spiritual person, it's the spark of the divine, right? And I'll be honest, I believe in that. I believe that each of us carries a spark of the divine. We are all created in God's image. And I think where in the past we haven't really understood what that means is because we think that God has a physical manifestation. So how can God be black, white, woman, trans? No. And that's not at all, I don't think, what the scriptures teach us, whether we're talking about, ancient, the Vedas from India, or the Hebrew Bible, the Christian variant, whatever ancient scripture. I think they're trying to tell us something else. And that is that there is a spirituality in the universe, call it karma, and we each have just a touch of it somewhere in us. And that influences the chemical reactions in our brains that makes us human. And you and I both know people that have less humanity than others, right? Not everybody has that sense of humanity in them. But I think to be a good leader, you have got to have it in you. You cannot be a robot. There's something special there that makes you a good leader, as opposed to a great leader, as opposed to a bad leader. And I think that distinction, we talked earlier in another podcast about culture and character and morality. Well, I think it all comes from the same place. I think it comes from humanity. You got to be human. That make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And I'm fairly certain you're well aware that I ran several chapels Like, not, certainly I have no orders, but if someone needed to take care of a chapel in a forward operating base, that was me. Someone ran retreats on various naval units, that was me. I believe very much so in the divine spark you're referring to, and that all of us, whether it's my ally or my enemy, there's a divine spark there.
Right.
But there is a necessity in a military to look after the divine spark of our own people.
Yes.
And that humanity. And whether that's a spiritual version or whether that's simply a secular version, everybody has a humanity that is worth examining, looking at, and respecting.
Right.
But that can get blurred in a game. And when I say game, I mean the profession of the military is the profession of influence, and sometimes influence by bending to will.
Yes.
And that can be a difficult balance sometimes. How do I make sure that I have bent the will in accordance with the rules of the game or the rules of engagement?
Yeah.
And how do I keep my own humanity, my own empathy? Because I don't think either one is right or wrong. And I think every human on the planet has the ability to make these decisions. It's when do we turn on our empathy or our humanity? And when do we say, no, for the sake of the greater good, I need to act in accordance with this mission? What are some of the things you found to be successful in dealing with this to become an enlightened professional soldier?
So there's a bunch. I would argue probably the best way to put it would be that a leader needs to be constantly attuned to the emotional state of the people that he or she is leading. Let me give you an example. As a captain, I was still learning to be a leader, and I was modeling myself after all of the good leaders that I had up to that point. But honestly, I was a captain. I had 8 or 10 years service, and I had 8 or 10 outstanding leaders, and I had just as many bad ones. So I was trying to pluck, right? And one of the things that I noticed that I liked most about the best leaders that I had had to that point was that they were conscious of the people around them and how they were feeling. And I'll give you a concrete example. So I had the honor as a captain when I was an instructor at the Officer Candidate School when it was in Chilliwack. I was selected to be one of the instructors for the Commissioning from the Ranks program. It was funny because just about everybody in my platoon had joined the military before I was born, right? I had a lot of senior warrant officers and no chiefs because they automatically got commissioned to captain. But one of the guys I had was very, very young relative to his peers, and he was an aeroframe tech master corporal, so RCAF in those days, just air component. And he was really keen and eager, but he had an inferiority complex because he was a master corporal with all of these old grumpy warrant officers. But he was a very positive guy. And one day, in one of our classes, he was sitting quietly, and he usually asked a question, had an answer, so at the end of the class, I called him. I said, Master Corporal, yes, sir. And he came. I said, come to me at the end of the day. Come see me in my office. His eyes went wide. And, yes, sir. I said, carry on. So at the end of the day at 4:00, he came to my office door, came to attention, saluted. I said, come in, shut the door. And he was terrified. He's, sir, am I in shit? Have I done something wrong? I said, no, just the opposite. Please have a seat. I said, what's wrong? He said, nothing's wrong, sir. I'm fine. Everything's fine. I said, no. Everything's not fine. Something's bothering you, but I don't know what it is. So I can't help you if I don't know what's bothering you. So please tell me what's bothering you. And he looked stunned. And he said, I've been in the Air Force 12 years, and I don't know how many bosses I've had. You're the first one who's ever noticed that I was having a bad day and wanted to know so that he could help me. I said, oh, I'm sure that's not true. He says, trust me, sir. I said, okay, what's wrong? So my wife is struggling because we've never been apart this long. You know, I said, I see. Okay, well, when did you call her? You know, and he said, well, this was life before cell phones. And he said, it's expensive to call back, and I don't, just a math corporal, don't have a lot of money. And I said, I have the solution. I said, see that phone? That's a trunk line. You can call anywhere in the world if you got the number. I said, where does your wife live? Let me think. You're in Winnipeg, right? Yes, sir. And I pulled out my said, okay, there's the 4-digit code. Dial those 4 digits and then your wife's home number. And I'm going to go grab a coffee and shut the door. And I won't come back in until you come up. So have a good long talk with your wife. I thought he was going to weep. All right. I mean, and to me, it was nothing, right? It cost me nothing. All I did was ask, what's bothering you?
It's so funny that you say all I did was ask what's bothering you, but there's 2 things there that as coach, I always come back to that I want to just put into the conversation.
Right.
First was the emotional intelligence. I saw that there was a bad day. Okay. There's lots of time where we ask people, how you doing? Fine. Keep going. They could be on the floor crying in the Navy. We would accept that fine.
Oh, he's fine.
He's fine. Hey, what's going on with Johnson over there? He's fine. Told me he was fine earlier. He's
we're
good.
both married. Your wife's pissed at you.
Fine.
You okay? I'm fine.
Fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. But the second thing, and it's in your story, and I want to put this out there, was psychological safety.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, that we don't necessarily, like, my answer to my CEO for 90% of, hey, are you good to go? Good to go, sir. Let's go.
Right.
Got this.
Right.
But if it was genuinely psychologically safe, on one of my deployments, I lost a grandparent, and I remember, I got to go on mission like right now.
Right.
And someone asked me about it, and I didn't feel psychologically safe to say, Grandma died.
Right.
But I'm still squared away. I just went, I'm squared away, and carried on with it. But if someone had scratched the surface even a little bit and said, hey, what's going on, Marty? You're like, this is different. People were saying it's different, and they got it, and I obviously was. We need that psychological safety. We need to set the table.
Yes.
And it's hard when a system has both discipline on one side and humanity on the other. Do you have a story or an example where you can talk about discipline and humanity?
Do I ever?
And how they come together?
I do. And it's one of those moments in my career that I am most proud of, and I don't want to brag. I did a lot of things I was very proud of, but this particular incident, and it shocked a few people, and I know it made the rounds in the regiment. So I was commanding my regiment in Germany, and we had a master corporal, a francophone, who he'd blotted his copybook, so to speak, and so his squadron commander had him charged, and the squadron commander felt that didn't have powers of punishment necessary. I don't even remember the crime, but came to my desk. I reviewed the findings with the JAG, and I agreed that if I found him guilty, that he was going to be stripped of his rank and sent to Edmonton for 2 weeks. So we held the trial. We held the trial in a little shack in the middle of the woods, just away from the tank park. I think we were in Hohenfeld in northern Germany. We went through the whole thing, and then I found him guilty, and I sentenced him to 2 weeks in Edmonton, and then dismissed everybody. And I had some paperwork to sign. The JAG and I had a little chat, and then I was getting ready to go. I was going to take my tank out. And when I stepped out onto the porch of this little hut, he was standing there with his escort. They were waiting for the vehicle that was taking them directly to a Herc that was going to take them to Edmonton. And so they all came to attention. I dismissed the escorts, and I said to him, you're married? And he said, oui, monsieur. And I said, your wife is a unilingual francophone in downtown Lahr. Oui, monsieur. Does she have any friends? There's one neighbor, he said. we were doing this in French. I could see the surprise on his face. Why was the CO talking to him? And I said, is she going to be okay? Uh, uh, you have a baby, I said. And he said, oui, monsieur, 2 months. I said, okay, here's the deal. So I found you guilty. You're going to jail, but you're going to be gone only 2 weeks. But 2 weeks is a long time when you're all alone. You don't speak the language and you got a baby. So every day, the duty sergeant is going to stop and visit your wife, and he's going to deliver diapers and baby food, make sure that she has everything she needs every day for the next 2 weeks, so that you can go and pay your punishment and then come back and be a good soldier. Because I know you can be a good soldier, because if I didn't think you could be a good soldier, I would have thrown you out. The look on his face is burned into my memory. It was like, why are you being nice to me? And this doesn't make sense to me. You convicted me and are sending me to jail, but you're concerned about my welfare and my wife and my baby. And he didn't ask me that, but if he had asked me, I would have said, because it's my responsibility as your leader to behave this way.
That is so powerful. As I think about that story, and I think about psychological safety that we were just talking about, you created a space for his psychological safety to know, yeah, I'm punished, but my family, because we all fight for something.
Yeah.
Patriotism, family, whatever it is, we've all got, his family was taken care of in that moment. His psychological, I can go and face my punishment because I am psychologically safe because my family is safe.
Right.
What an amazing way to talk about that, because we don't talk about that very often in the military.
We don't.
And maybe to that point, is there something that we could be doing differently? In coaching, I refer to it as setting the table.
Yeah.
So when I became a conflict coach and was working for ADR back in the day, alternate dispute resolution, we would talk all the time about, hey, it's the first time you're meeting someone. When you meet them and there's a conflict because they're coming to ADR.
Exactly.
Where are the tables? Where's the chair? Where's the door relative to the, like, you would set the room up to make it as comfortable as possible and use language as comfortable as possible so that someone would feel, you can trust me, I will help you. Because in conflict, we don't always feel, I can trust you.
No, exactly.
But we have a lot of leaders who really are trustworthy. Yes. Is there a way we could help them set the table better for conversations that could be solved through psychological safety, as opposed to, because things will build up, and we see this all the time. I used to call it the foreign port effect. When we got to foreign port, every time people have been cooped up for a while, you'll know exactly who's going to do what. You could see it. Yeah. First night out, you're going to see you're going to see who's going to get in trouble. You're going to see, and it had everything to do with how safe or unsafe they felt, or how satisfied or unsatisfied they felt. And you're like, oh, that person's usually really good, but they're going to get they're going to get charged tonight. Yeah. Like if I don't go with them, yeah, I know they're going to, because we don't check that stuff out during the missions.
No, you're absolutely right.
What could we be doing to check for that during the missions so that Johnny doesn't go out and punch the bartender
on his run ashore?
On his run ashore.
Yeah. I was on a run ashore. But anyway,
different podcast.
Good. Yeah, exactly. I want to take this back to an earlier comment that I mentioned in a previous podcast, which was, you asked me what I do to help make things better, and I talked about teaching philosophy to our leaders, and it goes back to that point, and that is, I consider myself fortunate. I studied philosophy, and if you go to my library, there's the classics, Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and those guys. And I'm not a trained philosopher, but I've read enough philosophy that I can impress you with quotes. But I think that subliminally, it taught me things, right? And one of the things I think that we make a mistake with in the military is that we think that there is a hard dividing line between being the strict disciplinarian leader, right? As you said earlier, I will bend you to my will if I have to, physically, and the soft and cuddly, oh, come give me a hug, right? And that there is no dividing line there. One blends into the other, and that line never stays in the same place for more than a nanosecond. And, I think without training, without education, without practice, without drilling, the leader is left without the necessary tools to understand when should I soften this up and when should I stiffen it up. So I once, in order to prepare myself to teach the commissioning from the ranks course, I had to spend 2 weeks in Saint Jean at the management school, and they did a miserable job. I mean, an absolute failure of a job. And it wasn't because they didn't want to be good instructors. It was because they had this idea that being teaching us how to be good managers as opposed to leaders meant that there was no rank. The commandant of the school welcomed us in the classroom, and we had coffee and cookies. And he said, "For the next 2 weeks, I'm Bob, and welcome to the management school, and these are your instructors." And then we had coffee, and he walked over to me, and he was an Air Force lieutenant colonel, and he said, "So, Chuck?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "No, I'm Bob." I said, "No, sir, you're not. You're the commandant of the school, and you're an Air Force lieutenant colonel, and I'm an Army captain, and you're colonel or you're sir." He goes, "No, we don't do that sort of thing here," right? And his instructors were the same, and they got it wrong. Because I remember we had a little skit in one of the scenarios where I had to portray the wing commander in Trenton, and I had a soldier come before me, and that soldier had done something, and I was supposed to be all soft and cuddly and discover from the soldier that soldier was on the side taking my daughter out, who was underage, as opposed to run an orders parade. And, and in the debrief, I was chastised, and I said, Ben, who was the captain, who was the instructor, said, "You've got this completely wrong. You are conflating my humanity with my legal obligation to charge this person and run them through a military tribunal. Do not conflate those things. I can be both at the same time, but I'm not going to be the warm and cuddly guy with the RSM standing there, and the JAG and, the escort. You've got it completely wrong." And so we need guys who, with your kind of training, to teach our leaders to understand that it's a spectrum. They need to know where they need to be on that spectrum based on who they're talking to and what the situation is and what the needs of the unit are.
That's beautifully said. And you remind me very much of, we used to have, you're either sick or you're healthy. There was no spectrum.
No.
There was, you're on parade and I'm going to walk you to death, or you're dying, because heaven help you, broken leg, you're walking if you're not dying. That's it.
Yep.
But when we come to dealing with humanity, which is where we started with this, there was you're either hard or you're soft. I think that's a wrong, as a dichotomy. I think it's just like healthy or sick. It's not a healthy space. And what you just brought up on spectrum is exactly that. Yes. There are useful tools. There are useful tools with my team, and there's useful tools with my enemy. And the thing is, it's the same set of tools.
Right. How you apply them.
And how we apply them.
Right.
And whether this is going to make a better team or a more compliant enemy.
Right. Yeah. Give up. I won't have to kill you.
There are ways we can do this without the application of force.
Right.
I'd prefer to do that today, but like you just said, I'm obligated as a professional to make sure that I'm using all the tools in my tool belt, including the application. Indeed. And that's the humanity of the profession of war. And I think you just did it beautifully on that spectrum.
Well, thank you.
So I do want to say thank you for today's conversation.
I thank you, Marty.
And I look forward to our next one.
As do I.